Welcome to the Mindful Money Podcast. This podcast is a weekly exploration into a new philosophy of money through psychology, philosophy, and practical wisdom. In this episode of the Mindful Money Podcast...
But it's more about recognizing that not everything needs to be so materialistic, and when you take off that layer of materialism, you realize there's a greater reason why we're all here is to better each other.
So hey, Shefik, thanks for joining me on the Mindful Money Podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, no problem at all. I really appreciate you being here, and you've had a lot going on with your Invocation series and your recent award, right?
Yes, definitely. I've had won 3 awards, 3 Marcom Awards, which is very prestigious industry awards. I won 2 for the radio show itself. It's Shefik Presents Invocation is the name of the show. 2 for, one for the episode on love, Songs to Invoke Love, and the other one, Songs to Invoke Society. And then I won 2 gold awards for that, and then 1 platinum award for the website itself, invocation.co.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
What inspired you to make Invocation? I remember we touched base almost a year ago and it was just in development. So
yes.
What sparked that?
Well, it's sort of like a full circle moment for me. So right now, 2017, I'm celebrating the 20th anniversary of my career in our entertainment and technology industries. So back in the day, in 1997, I actually worked as a publicist, working in the industry. So my first clients that I worked with were like people like Dionne Warwick, the Isley Brothers, a whole host of people. I worked for an independent boutique sort of publicity firm called Double Exposure. So I was in charge of those accounts on behalf of those companies. I also worked a lot with Motown Publishing, Motown Records, their publishing division, and also with Island Records. So after that, I got to the point where by me celebrating the 20th anniversary of my career, I decided to find out where some of these past clients are in their own careers and trying to how do I proceed in my career after this point. So that's why I reached out to former clients such as Dionne Warwick and Melba Moore. Those are the first celebrity clients that I reached out to, and they were on board to help me out right away without really knowing the full scope of what this project is, because I literally been shooting for close to a year before the show launched in July 4th, 2016. And so they were very helpful and giving me that full circle moment with them. And they also understood the scope of what I was trying to do for the long term.
Nice. So what are you trying to do over the long term? What's that vision?
The vision is to, I have a number of goals. One of the goals is actually travel to every 50 state. And actually, by doing that, to document some sort of moment of life. So it's not necessarily just celebrities that I do. I do politicians, I do doctors, I do all sorts of people from all walks of life. And I just wanted to travel to every 50 state to be able to document something that represents that part of the world or that part of the country. So far I've traveled to about 6 or 7 states, which is New York. Obviously, I'm based in New York. I've done New Jersey. I've done Massachusetts, Maryland, going to Washington, D.C. next. I've done Texas. I've done Illinois, and California. So basically, it helps to not only document what's going on in those particular areas of the world, but also it gives hope for those people that are there too, to recognize that someone who has a natural footprint that's looking to document what they're doing, and doing it in a meaningful manner.
Nice. So what is how have you seen people change as a result of listening to your show or consuming your media, you could say, right?
Well, it's very challenging at times, because it is a new type of show. So basically the concept is, it's called, Shefik Presents Invocation is the full name of the show. And basically the concept is that every episode I focus on one particular topic. And then based on one topic, the guest comes on and talks about something meaningful to them. So the show is all pre-taped. It's an hour show. And basically I allow the guests to talk for anything that they want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So whether they want to promote something or not is sort of a secondary thing. It's more about the topic itself and how they celebrate the topic in their own lives. So as far as when I reached out to recording artists, naturally this is a music-based show. Right. So I've been reaching out to some of the artists themselves who actually perform the songs, or people behind the scenes that wrote or produced the songs, and they give me anecdotes, of things that occurred to them. Like for a perfect example, recently when I was in California, I taped with a number of people, particularly Saida Garrett, People may know Saida because she's the writer, well, the co-writer of Man in the Mirror for Michael Jackson. So I actually taped with her to get some Michael Jackson stories about her experience working with Michael. She also did I Just Can't Stop Loving You. She performed a duet with him, which is on her Bad album, or his Bad album. And then she wrote a number of other songs, like Keep the Faith, which is on the Dangerous album.
And these are just things that people are just have this association with. Like your thing about the her album or his album, you just said the name and I'm like, wow, these are classics.
Right. Definitely. So by documenting that story with her, she gave me a real insight into the creative process that she did with her. And working with Quincy Jones, who's the producer of the song. And she gave me some real anecdotes behind the scenes about how Michael Jackson was in the studio with her. And Michael just turned to her and said, I want to sing the song just like you do. Because obviously she did the demo first and did her, practice vocals. And Michael just said, I want to sing the song just like you. And literally when she went back into the studio, he was there and he started following her with a camera. And she was like, oh, well, why are you following me? You're Michael Jackson. Why do you want to do it like me? And he said, well, I love your voice. I want to do it like you did it. And it was very fortunate for her because at this particular point, obviously, Michael had the Thriller album, and this was his, follow-up album, which was very, highly anticipated what he's going to do next. And when he did the Bad album, he really co-wrote the entire album. So she was fortunate enough where she was signed as a writer to Quincy Jones's publishing company. And she literally just wrote the song, co-wrote the lyrics, and basically submitted it. And, Quincy loved it, played it to Michael. Michael loved it right away. So rather than Michael being conceited and saying, well, I'm Michael Jackson, I had to write all the songs, he allowed that song to be on that album just because he admired the writing style that she had, her own singing voice. And then later on, she did a duet from the same album and also went on tour with him for the subsequent, Dangerous album.
That's incredible.
So I did that. And then it was just a coincidence that I was actually going to town to shoot Yashi Brown, which is Michael Jackson's niece. And
so were you and Michael like this? It sounds like you just really connected with everybody that he knows.
But again, this is one of the full circle moments for me.
Okay.
Because I used to work at Time Magazine, and that was like my first professional IT career, which is 2007, 2008. I worked there, and I was a technical producer. So as it turned out, that's the year that Michael Jackson died.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually on the road at the Washington Bureau of Time Magazine, training the writers over there because I do the technology there. So anytime I develop new technology, I have to train the writers and editors from all around the world. So this particular time, I was in location at the Washington Bureau, and Michael had died. And basically, the managing editor at the time sent out a mass communication saying all hands on deck kind of thing, because we need to really document this. And they end up doing like a special edition for Time Magazine on Michael Jackson. And then also they want to do video coverage. And they said that they sent out the interns to go to the local, music stores to buy, material, and all the stores were out. So when he sent out this mass communication, I was like, well, I actually own a lot of rare Michael Jackson footage. So by doing that, I end up, co-producing a video for Time Magazine at the time. And it ended up being a video where they had a lot of other celebrities giving their condolences, such as, Lenny Kravitz was on there. A lot of people, Ryan White's mother,
Wait, was this in the video that you shot?
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I didn't shoot the video. I helped produce it because I had footage of rare footage of Michael Jackson, so I provided that to the production itself. It was a collaborative effort of all the, senior people at Time Magazine that we put together this video. Yeah. So I contributed to that, and by doing that, they did a follow-up thing because obviously they had the movie that came out afterwards. So they came back to me and said, "Well, do you have anything else for that?" So I did, and so that's why I ended up actually working on 2 productions for Time Magazine that had Michael Jackson in there. And that was my moment where I could actually contribute back to my condolences to his family and give something back, to somebody I admire as an artist.
Yeah.
And, definitely years later where, again, more recently, being able to sit down one-on-one and have people like Saida Garrett on my show, Yashi Brown, who's Michael Jackson's niece, who's also, obviously Janet Jackson's niece, and it's Rebe Jackson's daughter, and sitting down with them both, one-on-one and have these kind of conversations, rare conversations. It's very rewarding for me to be able to bring that out to the public, in that kind of manner that I do.
Yeah, and you do a fantastic job of it. I've heard the show, and I mentioned to you over brunch earlier that you have this dynamic of weaving and interrelating different concepts and different ideas together, almost to make these people seem, I don't want to say more accessible, but that's kind of how it feels when I'm listening. It's like they're right there in the room,
right.
With me. Mm-hmm. And so many of our audience, so many of the listeners here are people that are really trying to access that kind of stuff. They've got this mindset of, there's something in the way that I'm trying to break through. How did you come across these opportunities? Like, is this something that you would say takes a lot of money to create, or, how did you run across this stuff?
Well, it's definitely something where I'm self-funding it, initially to launch it off the ground. But when you're dealing with the technology of today, you could do everything out of your house, So I am doing a majority out of my house as far as the compilation of the show itself and doing the editing and doing all that myself. But the actual shooting of it, I usually go on location. Mm-hmm. I either go to the artist's house, like for example, I went to Saida Garrett's house and shot it there. Or again, me wanting to travel there 50 state, I actually go on the road. Or otherwise, I just have my own location, a central location in Midtown Manhattan, that I actually have the guests come in and do. Because when I do a shoot, I shoot multiple people on the same day. Right. So that helps to, reduce cost because I'm able to do that, and then just centralize everything at once. So if you think back, I'm not quite sure how old you are, but like 20 years maybe, let's say, when you were a young kid or a younger kid. We look at the hair now, I wonder. But but when you think back and, you may not have even been out of high school yet, how is your perspective on what you have access to and what it takes to be quote unquote successful? You won all these awards, you've got all these shows. How has that shifted from when you were a kid up to now? Well, first of all, I was already out of high school, so I am. All right. Well, you look younger than that. Yes. But it's the kind of thing where when I first started in the business, I actually started to try and be a writer. Mm-hmm. I'm a lyricist, and then I have a colleague of mine who's now a newscaster at NBC in Albany. And we wrote songs together. We went to college together. I actually ended up getting him a record deal. Nice. But we had a falling out with the label. It didn't work out too well, and we already started recording some of the songs, and which is kind of unfortunate that these songs never, sort of light of day. But there is one song that actually came out. It's in a movie that came out in 1999. It's called The Prodigy. And so back then, Blockbuster Video was still vaguely remember Blockbuster. Yeah, so this movie went nationwide on Blockbuster. It was like a direct to VHS. If people remember VHS, so it was there. And then I co-wrote the theme song with my writing partner, and the song's called "The Rain," which is actually in there, and it's the only song in the entire movie. It's ended up being a theme song for the credits. So back then it was very difficult to actually do writing because it's very expensive, because studios were very expensive back then. You didn't have the sort of home equipment like you do now, right? So it was very costly. But we stuck through it because I was very persistent, even back then. There's one particular instance I remember where when I went to school in SUNY Plattsburgh, which is upstate in Plattsburgh, New York, I used to travel back and forth to the city in New York City. And one of the things I did, I had meetings with particularly Mary J. Blige's, ex-manager. So this was like the first year she came out, with the What's the 411 album, sold like 3 million copies. What year was this? This was 1992. Okay. This is like very early on. Yeah, very early on. And basically what I did was, back then we actually had physical CDs. We still have physical CDs now, but it's not what it really used to be. You actually had books, really collector's items. So I would actually read the liner notes, which is actual information that's in the book. Yeah. And then I realized that these artists keep on thanking people. So I started memorizing the names, starting reading the names. And then when you have a large collection of CDs and you realize there's certain names that appear consistently in certain albums. So it's not really trying to say, well, how do you break into the business? Not really, okay, well, let me try and meet Mary J. Blige. Meet the people that are behind Mary J. Blige, because those are the people that fund the albums. Those are the people who have the final say. One of the things he did was had me come down from my school to New York City to meet with him. And he literally had me sit in his office for 6 hours. So it's the kind of thing where...
some kind of test or something?
Yes, it was exactly a test. and I, at first, I'm the kind of person where I'm a very calm person. I don't get upset very easily in that manner. And I realized that with me first starting out in the business, I need that opportunity to even have a sit-down meeting with him. And if he's going to challenge me in that way, I'll accept the challenge. Mm-hmm. So I accepted the challenge, not with him explicitly saying, I'm going to challenge you and I'll make you sit here. You just intuitively knew, right? Yes, I knew he was going to do that because they kept on saying, oh, he's busy right now, he's busy. But we had a meeting scheduled. But naturally, his day dragged on and on. So I was only sitting 6 hours. But he was really wanting to find out if I'm willing to do what it takes to have the persistence to meet. You mentioned that word, yeah. Yeah. So it's not necessarily he was being egotistical about, well, I'm Mary J. Blige's manager, you need to wait for me. It's more about, am I persistent? Do I have the dedication to be in that moment and to accept what that moment may bring? So that was an important pivotal moment, because afterwards he came up to me and says, literally, to reference Star Wars, he says, well, I see you're ready to be a Jedi now. Yes. So I said, yes, it did. And it worked out very well for me, in that moment, because what ended up happening was he ended up getting a label deal through a very large label. But the label itself didn't come to fruition because he had partners, and for whatever reason, things didn't didn't come out. So that's why Mary's not actually managed, by that team anymore. So what ended up happening was that he saw the potential in me and my writing partner. So we were actually supposed to be part of his first production crew, because with him starting a new label, he was gonna have in-house producers. So he was considering us for that. And since his label deal didn't pan out, he actually started to introduce us to other people in the industry, because he did recognize we did have that sort of dedication and drive. So rather than just writing us off, he gave us referrals to other people at major labels. Nice. So it was a very interesting, journey that I started off doing that. And then, after I graduated college, then I got my first position, working at Double Exposure, which is the company I mentioned where I worked with Dionne Warwick and Isley Brothers, people like that. And I was very fortunate because some of the same companies that would have rejected me before, I'm now working hand in hand, with them, and in a kind of manner where they are listening to me, because I'm charged with their campaigns. I'm writing things that are beneficial to making them be better artists. So I definitely did my homework, because by reading these liner notes, by studying imagery, studying things that present to artists on a package scale, I was able to present that with me being a publicist, saying, here's what you do. Because it's not necessarily being a publicist, let me book you on this show and book you on that. There has to be meaning behind it. Yeah. Because there's definitely things where I did artist development training. I've had, particularly, I worked with, if you remember the movie, The Nutty Professor. I do. Yeah. Yes. I like that movie. Yeah. So the kid Hercules was actually a client of mine. So after I left Double Exposure, I still had my own clients. So he's one of my clients, and he also had a brother. His name is Big Time. So his name was Hercules, and then his Big Time. Hercules was his name really Hercules? Yes. That's hilarious. So that was his stage name. His stage name. So they were both actors, obviously, and they're rappers, together. Oh, wow. So I worked on their album, doing their publicity for the album. So it came out, the first single was for Hollywood. Jermaine Dupri executive produced it. And so I was really prepared, because I did artist development with them and actually did training with them to prepare them, because I recognized with them being kids, they need to be prepared on what it takes to meet people from all walks of life. Right. And you've studied this. It sounds like you studied this for most of your life, like what it takes to be prepared, who's connected to who, what you have to do to be successful in that area. Yes. And you didn't really launch or do anything or take action until you had everything together. Right. It's definitely about doing your homework. So I always tell people they want to know what it takes to be in the business. You have to do your homework to understand the mechanics of something before you could drive it. And once you understand the mechanics of it, then you could be the person that's on the forefront of innovation.
Nice.
Because it's not necessarily just accidental innovation. It's about being prepared in the moment. And sometimes it's not even knowing what that moment is. It's a matter of constantly perfecting your craft, constantly being ready for something, to know that there is a greater purpose in what you're doing. And then all of a sudden people do take notice. And that's how people innovate. That's how they become leaders in their craft and influencers. It's because you yourself have shown some sort of presence and drive in what you're doing. And that helps to elude and inspire others to do the same.
Yeah. So like what kind of, we could go a couple ways here. Like one thing I'm wondering is what advice would you give to younger people who want to get either in the music industry or in the entertainment industry or maybe even the technology industry and see this block, right? You say do your homework. Is there some other theme that you adopt? And then the other part is, you mentioned this greater purpose, and I really wonder what you think your greater purpose is.
Well, I could say more recently I've been invited to be a guest speaker at various events, and one of the events I was at was actually at the New York Public Library. They actually do free classes where they teach technology to people that want to change their careers or just starting out. So they brought me in to be the guest speaker for the graduating class in 2016. And I spoke to the class and I just told them about my own career path in technology and what it took me to get there. And it was kind of a sort of incidental way of doing things because, like I said, I did start in publicity, still start in the music business. But in the music business, it's a very series of ups and downs. You never know what might happen, and it's, the public and fans could be very finical about, what they consider the trend at the time. So with me being someone who's behind the scenes is supposed to be a tastemaker as far as helping trends proceed in that way, I had to sort of transform myself and my own business flow and what I'm doing. So one of the things I did was shift more into technology. So that's how I got into that, because by me working with artists, sometimes artists get in trouble with the label, they have arguments and they get dropped, or sometimes, the label does not being very supportive of them, so they don't give them the budget fully, or, what variety of reasons.
Accepted by the public is a big
exactly.
Deal.
And with me working as an independent contractor, sometimes I'm relying on their success. Whether the success is my fault or not,
it's like you're an investor in a way.
Yeah. And you can say that I'm investing in their talent and they're investing in me, hoping that I'll be able to, reciprocate in that manner. So it's a lot of times where, the song didn't perform as well as expected, and if I'm working as an independent contractor, my contract is immediately over. I may get other clients after that, but especially when you're working in a small team and company, you don't have time to pursue clients as much as you may like to, and work the project itself. So when I started to do a shift into technology, it was a fortunate time where technology and internet became a more prevalent, medium, because this is the infancy as far as internet as a medium. And, internet was around since the 60s and things like that. But as far as being something that's influential as a medium, I shifted to that. And so my first initial clients were basically people that were working in the entertainment industry. And by doing that, I can now have them for a long term. So if their project does shut down on the music side, I could still continue on with them on the internet side, because the internet side is something I have more control over. I could host their website, I could develop their website, and it's not so easy to replace someone on technology side.
Nice.
They may consider it easier to replace someone on the music side,
right? Because the song doesn't take off and contract's over. But
right, exactly.
With the technology, then you're continuously innovating and pushing them forward and giving them an edge that other people aren't.
Right, exactly. And if they realize that it's not so simple to do coding sometimes, and you really need to have someone on board. And even if they do decide to go with someone else, it may not be as cost effective to start with someone else, because that other person has to learn the code that's already there.
Exactly.
So that's how I was able to get long-term clients after that. And it kind of transcended to the point where, once again, I mentioned Time Magazine in 2007. Incidentally enough, they had an ad in Craigslist.
Time.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that was when Craigslist worked.
Yes. So it's very surprising that they did that. So I actually responded to the ad, and then I had a meeting, with Time Magazine. I went over there, and they basically gave me I had several meetings, about 3 different meetings with people over there, and they gave me the position. Initially, they were just wanting to hire me as a contract position, but then they just went ahead and gave me a full-time position right off without the contract, because they recognize, they want to have me there, for the duration and do things for them. And one of the things I did was had that portfolio work that I did already for my small business clients and my music clients to say, here's what I've been doing already by myself. And they saw that, and they recognized that they've been trying to do some of the similar things as far as using various APIs and things like that that are out there with a whole team, and not doing it maybe as effective as I may doing it. So that's why they decided to hire me. So that goes back to what I was saying with doing your homework, being prepared, because it's not necessarily I was being prepared to work at Time Magazine, but by being prepared, I was able to be ready to work at Time Magazine.
You had an edge.
Yeah. Yes.
Like
exactly.
what you gave to your clients.
Right. Exactly. And then kind of snowball to there. And then, saying, my discussion with the public library and the students over there, telling them by me going over there at the time and, working at Time Magazine, I was able to cross a threshold into the corporate world that I was not doing before on the music side. So from there, transcended where I worked at different competitors. The next position I had was Condé Nast, which is their direct competitor, as far as publishing. And then from there, I worked at, companies such as IBM and NBC and a whole host of, different companies.
That's crazy. So I like to leave the listeners with bite-sized pieces, something that they can do. I'm sure they're inspired hearing and listening to you. You've said, so very tangible things that they can grab onto. You've said, do your homework, be prepared. Is there another piece of advice that you would give to the people listening that want to obtain quote unquote success and put their message and their vision out there?
Yeah, you definitely have to be humble and know and accept your limitations and accept your expectations of what people expect you to do, and understand that, because it's not everything's done by one person, and you have to know that it takes a team of people to be a part of your team, not necessarily people there to do the work with you, but it could be people to encourage you to move forward. So you have to know that there are people out there listening and watching what you're doing, and they may not be very vocal about it immediately, because this happens to me a number of times where I've come across people later down the line and they realize they've been following me, my career, what I've been doing, and they said literally it helped to inspire them to do things. So it's just important to know that you always have to have that center, of yourself, to know that to be humble, and even if you reach the level of success, to be prepared to give back to others, and to know that that's how you're able to move the humanity forward, is that by helping others.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily about how much you're making, it's about how much you're giving.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. So I got one more question for you. First of all, thank you so much for joining me today on the show here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And for giving the wisdom that you've obtained through your success and your show and your experience to the people listening. I want to ask you one more thing, and it's something I ask every guest, but it always brings about a really interesting response. And that is, if you could imagine a world that didn't have money at all, what would that be like?
Well, I like Star Trek. and that's
probably the best response. So I just need to say, most people are like, I don't know. What do you mean? You're like, I like Star Trek. Let's go. So
exactly.
Go. I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm interested.
No, I like Star Trek, and Star Trek is, people who watch the show have known that it's evolved to the point, society's evolved to the point where it doesn't use money.
Okay.
On the show, and it's all about how you progress humanity, so people have a place in the world, and knowing that they appreciate their place. So it's not like for example, the book by Ayn Rand, Anthem, which is the total opposite of that, where everything's all socialism, and to the point where you're not even having an identity. It's about having a number. But it's more about recognizing that not everything needs to be so materialistic, and when you take off that layer of materialism, you realize there's a greater reason why we're all here, is to better each other, and basically move forward in that. And then by doing that, you could sort of focus on your own inner peace and strength, because it takes a lot to be financially stable.
Right.
It's a lot of stress. It's a lot of commitment to figure out how am I going to pay this bill or whatever. But if you alleviate all of that, what you're left with is with yourself and each other. And if you're helping to build each other rather than taking someone else's money and saying, okay, well, if you can't pay this, then I don't want to be associated with you, rather than saying, here's a skill that I have, here's a skill that you have, let's figure a way to build together. So
yeah. I love that response. There's just a subtlety I want to tease out for a second, and that is, are you saying that it's important that you see an importance in getting that financial stability prior to taking that step, or do you think that we can obtain that simply by coming together?
Well, it's obviously we're not at the Star Trek level right now as far as finances.
Yet. I don't know.
But it's a matter where, particularly if you have a certain level of success and financial stability, or even if you don't have the stability yet, you do have the ability to help someone else.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, oh, let me charge you X amount of dollars at a higher fee, when you know perfectly well that they can't. So there's been many times where I've offered my services for free to someone, or even on a barter basis.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily about, making an obscene amount of money off for somebody. It's about knowing that your work is appreciated. And then when you feel that your work is appreciated, that helps you appreciate yourself better. And by doing that, that's a reflection of yourself and to others. So that, I think that's the most important thing that collectively as humanity we need to, definitely nourish is the reflection of ourselves is in with each other.
Nice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That's such an empowering message. And again, thank you for joining us today on the Mindful Money podcast. And I think we'll be seeing each other again.
All right. Thank you. So I just want to say, definitely check out the website. Invocation.co is the name of the show's website. And you could tune in 5 days a week.
Yeah. Where can people find you on the dial there?
Well, I'm on 22 stations around the country right now. It's all terrestrial radio, AM, FM stations, but definitely go to the website, has all the schedules. I'm on 5 days a week as of right now, which is the same episode repeated every 5 days.
Nice.
From Wednesdays to Sundays at different time slots in cities around the country, United States.
Fantastic. What was the website? Invocation.co, right?
Yes, not .com, .co.
Just .co.
Just invocation.co.
Awesome, Shefik.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Mindful Money Podcast, a podcast for people who want to align their money with their values. Love this show? Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review. Want more incredible show content? Head over to mindfulmoneypodcast.com for show notes, past episodes, and a sneak peek at what's coming next. In next week's episode of the Mindful Money Podcast,
law school, business school, medical school, another 200, 300, 400,000 on top of that before you got your first job. How are you going to get out of that? So it's enslaved people in many cases.